The sound was loud, too loud to be a firecracker. 1 second we were laughing, flipping burgers, kids running barefoot on the grass, and the next second, bang, everyone froze. A woman screamed. Someone dropped a plate. And then we saw it, red splattered across the white picnic table. Blood. At least that's what she thought. Across the fence stood the HOA lady, the one who'd been watching us all afternoon. Her hands were shaking. Her face was pale, and in her grip a gun. She shouted. I thought someone was hurt. I thought that was blood. But here's the part nobody was ready for. That red wasn't blood. It was ketchup. Ketchup from a kid's hot dog. And because of that mistake or that excuse, a single bullet was fired during our family barbecue. A fun summer evening turned into a nightmare in seconds. And what happened next shocked the entire neighborhood. Before I take you deeper into this story, pause for just a second. Tell me something. Which city are you watching this video from right now? Drop your city's name in the comments. I read them all, and I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this is your first time here, welcome. This channel shares real-life stories that start normal and end in ways you never see coming. Stories that expose fear, power, ego, and the moments where everything goes wrong. So, before we continue, hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this don't come with warnings, and you won't want to miss the next one. Now, let's go back to that day. It was supposed to be simple. A backyard barbecue. A warm afternoon. Friends, family, laughter, food on the grill. The kind of day Americans live for during summer. No drama. No danger. No reason to think the police would be called. But there was one thing we didn't account for. Her. The HOA lady. Every neighborhood has one, clipboard in hand, rules memorized, eyes always watching. The person who complains about grass being half an inch too long, music being slightly too loud, kids being too wild. We'd had run-ins with her before. Notes on the door. Warnings in a mailbox. Passive-aggressive smiles that never reached her eyes. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared us for what she would do next. Because this time, she didn't come with a warning letter. She came with fear, a misunderstanding, and a gun. And from the moment that first shot echoed through our backyard, nothing was ever the same again. The day didn't start wrong. That's the scariest part. It began like one of those perfect suburban afternoons you see in commercials. Blue sky, soft breeze, the smell of charcoal floating through the air. Our backyard looked alive. Folding chairs spread across the grass, a long plastic table covered with foil trays, chips, buns, soda bottles sweating in the heat. Someone had music playing low, old-school R&B mixed with a little country. Kids ran in circles, laughing, their feet slapping against the lawn. It was supposed to be a celebration of nothing special, just family, friends, and summer. I remember flipping burgers on the grill, grease popping, smoke rising into the sunlight. My cousin was arguing about who made the best barbecue sauce. My aunt kept telling everyone to eat more, like food was about to disappear from the planet. Normal, loud, happy. But even then, I felt it. That strange feeling you get when someone's watching you. At first, I brushed it off. Paranoia, maybe. HOA neighborhoods do that to you. Rules everywhere. Cameras on doorbells, neighbors who peek through blinds like it's a hobby. Still, every time I turned my head toward the fence on the left side of the yard, I felt a chill. That fence, tall, white, perfectly clean, like it existed just to remind us we were being observed. And behind it lived her, the HOA lady. We all knew her, whether we wanted to or not. Mid-50s, always dressed like she was heading to a meeting that never ended. Hair pulled tight, lips always pressed together like smiling physically hurt. She'd been president of the HOA for years, or at least acted like she owned the position. We'd gotten letters before. One about the trash cans being out too long, another about excessive noise when my nephew's birthday party went 10 minutes past sunset. Once, she complained that our lawn chairs were unsightly. So yeah, history existed. But today, we were careful. Music low. Cars parked properly. No alcohol visible from the street. Kids staying in the yard. We were doing everything right. Still, around noon, I noticed the fence gate next door opened slightly, just enough for someone to peek through. I told myself not to look. Big mistake, because when I glanced over, there she was, standing perfectly still, watching. No wave, no greeting, just eyes locked onto our yard like she was studying a crime scene. I nudged my brother and whispered, "She's out again." He sighed, annoyed but calm. "Ignore her. We're not breaking any rules." That's what everyone always says before things fall apart. As the afternoon went on, the laughter got louder, the kids got messy, and the table filled with food stains, ketchup, mustard, barbecue sauce smeared everywhere. A couple of kids were eating hot dogs like they were racing each other. One of them tripped and squeezed his hot dog so hard. Ketchup shot across the table. Bright red. Thick. Sticky. Nobody thought twice. Why would we? It was ketchup. But that's when the tension shifted. I noticed her again, this time not behind the fence. She was standing in her backyard, closer now, phone in hand, her posture stiff, her head tilted slightly like she was trying to make sense of something she didn't like. She stared at the table, at the red stains, at the kids. Her face changed, the tight lips parted, her eyes widened, and for a split second she looked scared. That should have been a warning. I heard her shout something muffled, unclear. Maybe she was calling out. Maybe she was calling someone. I couldn't tell. Music was still playing. People were still talking. Life kept moving like nothing was wrong. Until it didn't. She disappeared from view. I remember thinking, good, she's gone. I wish I'd paid closer attention. Because a minute later, everything stopped. A sound ripped through the air, sharp, violent, impossible to misunderstand. Bang. No echo, no delay, just raw shock. The music cut off. Someone screamed. A plate shattered against the concrete. For a moment, nobody moved. Our brains couldn't catch up to what our ears had just heard. Then panic hit all at once. People ducked. Kids cried. Someone yelled, "Get down." I felt my heart slam against my chest as I spun toward the sound. And that's when I saw her, standing near the fence line, both hands gripping a gun. Her arms were shaking so badly it looked like the weapon might slip from her fingers. Her face was pale, not angry pale, but terrified pale. She pointed toward our table and screamed. I thought someone was bleeding. Everyone followed her gaze. The picnic table, the red stains, the ketchup. My stomach dropped. "That's not blood," someone shouted. "It's ketchup." But she didn't lower the gun. She didn't apologize. She just stood there, breathing hard, eyes darting, like she was the victim in all this. And in that moment, we realized something terrifying. This wasn't about rules anymore. This wasn't about noise or lawn chairs. A misunderstanding, a split-second assumption, had nearly cost someone their life. And the worst part? The shot she fired was only the beginning. For a few seconds after the gunshot, time didn't move the way it was supposed to. It stretched, sounds became distant like they were underwater. My ears rang, sharp and hollow, and all I could hear was my own breathing. Fast, uneven, panicked. The kids were crying now, high-pitched sobs cutting through the silence. Someone yelled a name. Someone else shouted for everyone to stay down. And still she didn't move. The HOA lady stood there frozen, gun still raised, eyes locked on the picnic table like it had personally betrayed her. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, as if she'd just run a mile. Whatever story was playing in her head, she was fully inside it. I stepped forward without thinking. Instinct. Adrenaline. Stupidity, maybe all three. "Put it down," I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to sound calm. "There are kids here." She flinched when I spoke, like she'd forgotten other humans existed. Her eyes snapped toward me, wide and glassy. "I thought someone was bleeding," she said again, louder this time, like repeating it would make it true. "I saw blood. I panicked. Blood." That word hung in the air. Behind me, my sister clutched her daughter, so tight the little girl whimpered. My uncle whispered prayers under his breath. Someone had already called 911. I could hear the operator's voice faintly through a phone speaker. "Ma'am, Another neighbor shouted from across the yard, "That's ketchup." A kid spilled ketchup. She looked back at the table. Really looked this time. The red stains. The half-eaten hot dogs. The overturned squeeze bottle lying on its side. Her face changed again. Confusion replaced fear. Then something darker crept in, embarrassment maybe, or anger. She lowered the gun slightly but didn't let go. "Well," she snapped, her voice suddenly defensive, "how was I supposed to know?" That's when the shock turned into rage. "You don't shoot first," someone yelled. "You call for help." She opened her mouth to argue, but the sound of sirens cut her off. Distant at first, then louder. Police. Instead of relief, her posture stiffened. She glanced toward her house like she was considering retreat. For a terrifying second, I thought she might run, or worse, panic again. "Just stay where you are," I said, hands raised. "The police are coming." She scoffed. "I'm the HOA president. I was protecting the neighborhood." Protecting. That word hit me harder than the gunshot. Protecting us from ketchup? The sirens grew closer. Blue and red lights began flashing against fences and rooftops. Within minutes, officers poured into the area, weapons drawn, voices sharp and commanding. "Drop it! Put the weapon down!" She finally did. The gun hit the grass with a dull thud. Officers rushed in, securing it, pulling her hands behind her back. She protested loudly, insisting this was all a misunderstanding, that she was the one who was scared, that she thought someone was in danger. Meanwhile, paramedics checked everyone in the yard. Miraculously, no one was hit. No physical injuries. But the emotional damage? That was everywhere. Kids shaking. Adults in tears. Neighbors staring from behind curtains like they were watching a crime show. As the police questioned witnesses, the story unraveled piece by piece. Yes, she saw red. Yes, she assumed it was blood. Yes, she panicked. But here's what made things worse. She never came over to check. She never yelled for help. She never called 911 first. She went straight to her house and came back armed. When that detail came out, the officers exchanged looks. Serious ones. Her confidence started to crack. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she said softly now, her earlier authority gone. "I was just scared." One officer replied calmly, "Fear doesn't excuse this." The neighborhood went quiet as she was placed in the back of a patrol car. No more shouting. No more excuses. Just the sound of a door closing. I looked around our backyard, the grill still smoking, food untouched, ketchup drying in the sun. A place that had felt safe just an hour earlier now felt violated. Kids kept asking the same question. Why did she do that? No one had a good answer. As the police drove away, one thing became clear to all of us. This wasn't just a scary moment. This was going to change everything, the neighborhood, the HOA, and the way we looked at safety forever. And the consequences were only just beginning. By the next morning, the barbecue felt like something that happened in another lifetime. The yard was quiet, too quiet. The folding chairs were stacked away, the grill scrubbed clean, and the picnic table, the same one she claimed was covered in blood, had been wiped down until not a single red stain remained. If someone walked into our backyard without context, they'd never guess a gun had been fired there less than 24 hours ago. But the neighborhood knew. Oh, it knew. Because before the sun fully came up, the story had already started spreading, and not the truth. It began with a post. Someone shared a screenshot in the neighborhood group chat. The HOA Facebook page. A long paragraph written by her. She called it an unfortunate incident. She said she acted out of concern for community safety. She claimed she believed there was an active medical emergency and that the gun discharged accidentally. Accidentally. My hand shook as I scrolled. According to her version, she was a responsible leader who reacted quickly. According to her version, the backyard was chaotic, unsupervised, and dangerous. According to her version, she was the one who deserved understanding. There was no mention of the kids. No mention of her going inside to get the gun. No mention of how close that bullet came to real people. She ended the post with, "Let's all remain calm and respectful as authorities review the situation." Respectful. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Within minutes, comments flooded in. Some neighbors questioned her actions. Others defended her loudly. She was scared. She thought someone was hurt. She was just protecting the neighborhood. Protecting. That word again. By noon, local news vans lined the street. Reporters knocked on doors, microphones out, cameras rolling. Suddenly, our quiet subdivision was a headline waiting to happen, and she knew it. She'd lawyered up. When police tried to follow up, she declined further comment. When reporters asked for interviews, she hid behind statements. When neighbors asked her directly what she was thinking, she avoided them completely. But here's what she didn't expect. We had witnesses. Videos started appearing online. Phone recordings from different angles. One clip showed her standing calmly before the shot. No screaming, no visible panic. Another captured her saying, "I thought it was blood," after the gun was already fired. The timeline didn't match her story. And once the internet noticed, it didn't let go. Comment sections exploded. People dissected every frame, every word, every excuse. Experts weighed in, former officers, legal analysts, HOA horror stories. And the public reaction? It wasn't kind. Why didn't she call 911 first? Why did she grab a gun? Who fires into a backyard full of people? Questions she couldn't answer. Meanwhile, inside the neighborhood, tension grew thick enough to choke on. Some residents stopped letting their kids play outside. Others started avoiding HOA meetings altogether. A few openly demanded her resignation. She didn't step down. Instead, she doubled down. A new email went out to homeowners claiming she was being harassed, that she feared for her safety. That misinformation was spreading. Misinformation, as if a gunshot was up for debate. Police reports leaked soon after. Not officially, but enough details made their way around. The bullet trajectory, the lack of immediate threat, the decision to retrieve a firearm rather than seek help. That's when fear turned into something else. Anger, not just toward her, but toward the system that gave her power. How long had people like her been hiding behind titles and rules? How many times had fear been mistaken for authority? At the next HOA meeting, the first one since the incident, the room was packed. People who never showed up before were suddenly sitting front and center. She walked in late. No clipboard this time. No confidence. Eyes followed her as she took her seat. Whispers filled the room. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. She repeated the same lines. Fear, misunderstanding, concern. But something had changed. No one clapped. No one nodded. No one believed her. Because once a story is exposed to the light, control slips away. And her version of events was falling apart. What she didn't realize yet was that the real consequences weren't going to come from the HOA. They were coming from the law, and from the families who would never forget the sound of that shot. Weeks passed, but the sound of that gunshot never really left. It lived in the quiet moments, when the house settled at night, when a balloon popped on TV, when a car backfired down the street. The kids started flinching at sudden noises. Adults pretended they were fine, but you could see it in their eyes, the constant scanning, the loss of ease. Normal had been taken from us. And still, for a while, nothing seemed to happen. No arrest, no public charges, no clear answers. Rumors filled the silence. Some said she'd get away with it because of her HOA position. Others said her lawyer was pushing for a mistake under stress defense. A few people even believed the case would quietly disappear. That uncertainty hurt almost as much as the incident itself. Then, one Tuesday morning, everything changed. A police cruiser pulled up in front of her house. Not lights and sirens dramatic, but deliberate, heavy, final. Word spread through the neighborhood faster than wildfire. People stepped onto porches. Phones came out. Curtains moved. Officers knocked. This time, there was no confusion. She was charged, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, reckless endangerment, discharging a firearm within city limits. Charges no one expected, especially not her. When the news broke, the reactions were mixed. Some felt relief. Others felt fear. A few still defended her, claiming it was too harsh. But for the families who had been in that yard, it felt like validation. The official report made things painfully clear. She had no confirmation of an emergency. She had no immediate threat. She chose to arm herself before seeking help. That choice mattered. Her lawyer released a statement calling the charges excessive and insisting she acted out of genuine concern. But this time, the words didn't stick, because now it wasn't a neighborhood debate. It was a court case. The first hearing was packed. Families from the barbecue sat together, shoulder to shoulder. Parents held hands. Some brought written statements. One mother clutched a photo of her child taken just minutes before the shot was fired, smiling, ketchup on his face. She arrived flanked by attorneys. No eye contact, no apologies. When the judge asked how she pleaded, her voice barely carried. Not guilty. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Prosecutors laid out the timeline. Videos, witnesses, the moment she retrieved the gun, the decision to fire. Her defense focused on fear, on perception, on reasonable belief. But the judge asked one simple question that changed the tone of the room. Why didn't you call 911 first? There was no good answer. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Parents spoke. Neighbors spoke. Experts spoke. And for the first time, the story wasn't being controlled by her. It belonged to the people she terrified. Back in the neighborhood, something unexpected happened. The HOA board called an emergency vote. She was suspended. Not temporarily, not symbolically, removed from her position. Years of authority ended in a single meeting. When the announcement went out, the relief was almost physical, like a weight lifting off the entire block. But the victory was bittersweet, because even with charges filed, even with her power gone, the damage remained. Kids still asked questions. Parents still replayed the moment in their heads. Trust was still broken. And as the trial date approached, a new fear crept in. What if she walked free? What if fear and excuses were enough? Because the truth was, this case was bigger than one woman. It was about how quickly fear can turn deadly, and what happens when someone mistakes control for authority. The final chapter would decide whether accountability still mattered. Section 4, the charges no one expected. Almost equals 1,000 words, legal tension, emotional impact, turning point. Weeks passed, but the sound of that gunshot never really left. It lived in the quiet moments when the house settled at night, when a balloon popped on TV, when a car backfired down the street. The kids started flinching at sudden noises. Adults pretended they were fine, but you could see it in their eyes, the constant scanning, the loss of ease. Normal had been taken from us. And still, for a while, nothing seemed to happen. No arrest, no public charges, no clear answers. Rumors filled the silence. Some said she'd get away with it because of her HOA position. Others said her lawyer was pushing for a mistake under stress defense. A few people even believed the case would quietly disappear. That uncertainty hurt almost as much as the incident itself. Then, one Tuesday morning, everything changed. A police cruiser pulled up in front of her house. Not lights and sirens dramatic, but deliberate, heavy, final. Word spread through the neighborhood faster than wildfire. People stepped onto porches. Phones came out. Curtains moved. Officers knocked. This time, there was no confusion. She was charged, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, reckless endangerment, discharging a firearm within city limits. Charges no one expected, especially not her. When the news broke, the reactions were mixed. Some felt relief. Others felt fear. A few still defended her, claiming it was too harsh. But for the families who had been in that yard, it felt like validation. The official report made things painfully clear. She had no confirmation of an emergency. She had no immediate threat. She chose to arm herself before seeking help. That choice mattered. Her lawyer released a statement calling the charges excessive and insisting she acted out of genuine concern. But this time, the words didn't stick. Because now, it wasn't a neighborhood debate. It was a court case. The first hearing was packed. Families from the barbecue sat together, shoulder to shoulder. Parents held hands. Some brought written statements. One mother clutched a photo of her child taken just minutes before the shot was fired, smiling, ketchup on his face. She arrived flanked by attorneys. No eye contact. No apologies. When the judge asked how she pleaded, her voice barely carried. Not guilty. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Prosecutors laid out the timeline. Videos. Witnesses. The moment she retrieved the gun. The decision to fire. Her defense focused on fear. On perception. On reasonable belief. But the judge asked one simple question that changed the tone of the room. Why didn't you call 911 first? There was no good answer. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Parents spoke. Neighbors spoke. Experts spoke. And for the first time, the story wasn't being controlled by her. It belonged to the people she terrified. Back in the neighborhood, something unexpected happened. The HOA board called an emergency vote. She was suspended. Not temporarily. Not symbolically. Removed from her position. Years of authority ended in a single meeting. When the announcement went out, the relief was almost physical, like a weight lifting off the entire block. But the victory was bittersweet, because even with charges filed, even with her power gone, the damage remained. Kids still asked questions. Parents still replayed the moment in their heads. Trust was still broken, and as the trial date approached, a new fear crept in. What if she walked free? What if fear and excuses were enough? Because the truth was, this case was bigger than one woman. It was about how quickly fear can turn deadly, and what happens when someone mistakes control for authority. The final chapter would decide whether accountability still mattered. The trial lasted longer than anyone expected. Weeks turned into months, and every delay felt like reopening the wound. Each court date dragged the neighborhood back into that moment. The sound, the fear, the chaos. Some families stopped attending after a while. It was too much. Others showed up every time, determined to see it through. By the time closing arguments arrived, the courtroom felt heavy. Not tense, exhausted. She sat at the defense table, shoulders stiff, eyes fixed straight ahead. The confidence she once carried as HOA president was gone. No clipboard, no authority, just a woman waiting to hear whether her fear would excuse what she did. The prosecution went first. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't dramatize. They let the facts speak. They showed the videos again, slowed down, time-stamped. The moment she noticed the red stains. The moment she walked back into her house. The moment she came out with a firearm. They reminded the jury that fear does not equal danger. You don't get to shoot first and ask questions later, the prosecutor said, especially not into a backyard full of children. Then they played the 911 calls. Multiple voices. Multiple callers. All made after the gunshot. Not before. That detail hit hard. The defense stood and tried to soften the edges. They talked about perception, about panic, about a woman alone who believed she was responding to an emergency. But the jury wasn't buying it. During deliberations, the courthouse waited. Parents sat in silence. Some cried quietly. Others stared at the floor, replaying memories they wished they could forget. When the jury returned, you could feel it. Something was about to change. On the charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, time stopped. We find the defendant guilty. Gasps filled the room. One mother broke down sobbing. Someone whispered, "Thank God." She didn't react. Not at first. Then her face collapsed inward, like a mask finally falling off. The judge continued. Guilty on reckless endangerment. Guilty on unlawful discharge of a firearm. The verdict was clear. Fear was not an excuse. At sentencing, the judge didn't hold back. You chose a weapon over reason, he said. You endangered lives, children's lives, and you abused a position of perceived authority. She was sentenced to prison time, reduced but real, probation, mandatory counseling, a lifetime ban on firearm ownership. The gavel struck. It was over. Outside the courthouse, the cameras came back, but this time, the story had an ending. Parents spoke about relief. about accountability, about never wanting another family to experience what they had. Back in the neighborhood, something else happened. Kids slowly returned to playing outside. Laughter came back, cautious at first, but real. The HOA restructured. New leadership, new rules, transparency. But the memory never fully faded. That picnic table? We replaced it. The grill? Same one. But it never felt quite the same, because one moment of fear had rewritten everything. And that verdict sent a message far beyond our block. Authority does not come with a trigger. Fear does not justify violence. And sometimes justice actually shows up, even when you least expect it. But the final lesson came long after the courtroom emptied. Life didn't snap back to normal after the verdict. People expect that once justice is served, the pain neatly packs itself away, that a guilty verdict somehow rewinds time. But that's not how trauma works. It lingers. It reshapes routines. It teaches your body to stay alert long after the danger is gone. In our neighborhood, healing came slowly. At first, it was small things. Parents sitting outside a little longer while their kids played, music returning to backyard gatherings, low at first, like everyone was afraid sound itself might trigger something bad. Barbecues happened again, but they were different. People watched each other more closely. Every laugh was followed by a quick glance around, just to make sure everything was still safe. The kids changed the most. They asked hard questions, the kind adults struggle to answer. Why did she think ketchup was blood? Why didn't she just come ask? Why did she have a gun? There were no simple answers. All we could tell them was the truth. Sometimes adults let fear control them. Sometimes power makes people forget responsibility. And sometimes mistakes have consequences that can't be undone. The neighborhood itself felt older, like it had lost its innocence. People became more involved. HOA meetings filled up. Rules were rewritten with clarity instead of control. Decisions were questioned. Authority was no longer blindly trusted, and that might be the strangest outcome of all. One bad act forced an entire community to grow up. Every summer since, when we set up the grill, someone inevitably mentions it, quietly, not dramatically. A reminder, a shared understanding. We watch the kids run around with ketchup-stained faces, and someone always laughs a little too nervously. But we don't hide, because hiding is what fear wants. What happened that day taught us something powerful, something bigger than one woman, one HOA, one bad decision. It taught us that fear without facts is dangerous, that authority without accountability becomes a weapon, that assumptions can destroy lives in seconds, and most importantly, that speaking up matters. If those videos hadn't surfaced, if neighbors had stayed silent, if families had accepted excuses instead of truth, the story would have ended very differently. Justice didn't happen because the system magically worked. It happened because people refused to let fear rewrite reality. Even now, years later, that lesson echoes every time a neighbor chooses conversation over confrontation. Every time someone pauses instead of panics. Every time power is questioned instead of obeyed. That gunshot changed our backyard forever. But it also gave us something unexpected. Awareness, courage, community. And if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Fear is human. Mistakes happen. But violence is a choice, and choices come with consequences. If this story made you think, if it made you angry, emotional, or reflective, share it. Talk about it. Because stories like this don't just entertain, they warn. And maybe, somewhere out there, someone will pause long enough to choose better, before fear pulls the trigger. If this story shook you, if it made you pause, if it reminded you how fast a normal day can turn into a nightmare, don't scroll away. Backhand index pointing right like this video so more people hear the story. Backhand index pointing right, subscribe to the channel for real stories that expose truth, fear, and accountability. Backhand index pointing right, and comment below. Do you think fear can ever justify pulling a gun? Also, tell me this. Have you ever had an HOA experience that went too far? Your story might be the next one we share. Because silence protects the wrong people. And awareness? That saves lives. I'll see you in the next story.